All right. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good too. Thank you for doing this for the second time. I'm really excited for this one. It's a serious topic, but I don't think it will be that long or a podcast just to, na. I haven't even like prepared
Mm,
any notes and we're just gonna talk about what we feel. And I
mm,
don't think we need to introductions. I think people who've watched the podcast already know who you are. And we've done a very like successful podcast before. I'm successful the one, no? But it was a nice podcast, I know.
yeah.
Um, all right. Anyway, thank you for doing this again. So, for the audience, whoever's listening, this podcast is going to be about our opinion of what happened during the World Cup, the lives that were
Mm,
taken, and I mean, just sentiments around that, eh? Um, I'm gonna let you take the lead on this one because I mean, I know we've briefly chatted on this, I know. What was the first thing that went through your mind when you heard the news about all the lives, all the people that died in the process of that World Cup happening, in the making of that stadium and other peripheral things that happened during that?
mm. Yeah, so the very first time this issue came to my that I noticed this issue was back in 2015. I was just starting to debate then, and I remember that one of the motions were about how Qatar has won the bid for World Cup and
Right.
how like it started back then because we were debating, we as high schoolers, we were debating on this issue, which
Mhm.
meant that, and like high schoolers from Nepal, so which meant that it was a global phenomenon that everyone knew about, but no one necessarily talked about. But then, yeah, this issue came back and forth, and there were only a few human rights agencies talking about this, but not knowing what necessarily was happening because there isn't a clear transparency of people who were migrated from Nepal have gone to work
Mm-hmm.
uh, in that space or scenario. So yeah, this is something that I've known for quite some time, and have always felt very uneasy by the idea, and
Mm-hmm.
also felt very helpless because like being a high schooler and then like being just a student, there's only like there's a limit to what you can do.
Right.
So yeah, then the advocacy was limited to a debate room, but yeah, I knew about it and always felt very uneasy. But when the thing started coming up, I think it got quite a bit of attention. I think in the last year or so when the World Cup was getting nearer. And like I think like in the last World Cup as well. So like it does get hyped in some time, but
Right.
yeah, I think only in 2022 people really started talking about
Yeah.
national media started covering about it about where it's late, and like a lot of lives were already lost, something that could have been prevented if it was talked about from an earlier time by the international media. But yeah, so it's good that people at least know now, but
Mm-hmm. But it just
yeah.
became another news, and it just became like, oh, this happened. um what I found, like, I'm sorry, but I really found people really hypocritical during this time. And I mean, like, I know a lot of people are going to attack me after this, but I saw some people who were posting about, oh, so and so many lives were lost in World Cup, and very next day posting them enjoying the game. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't like enjoy the game or whatever, but I don't know. It just feels wrong, that that so many lives have, uh, like, so many people have died, and you're just enjoying the game, and it also shows the classism, I guess. And suddenly these people, these footballers, are earning in millions and millions, and they're enjoying their life, and oh, coste kosti goal hanyo, and they're like this. Their skills are being talked about while the stadium that they're playing in is literally like made with blood. And I don't know. I mean, I know that it's not their, it might not be exactly their place to take a stand, but I mean, it's only human, right, to at least address that, oh, this happened. And I didn't see anyone. I think like Germany or some company, like some country showed like a gesture for that, but that was it. Like it wasn't talked about. Like few days World Cup started, already few people posted and like they were like, oh, this happened, blah blah blah. But then it just became another news. Okay, honey,
Mm.
what do you have to
Yeah,
say about that?
I have, I think, mixed response. I mean, I personally, I didn't watch a single game. It didn't feel right for me. I
Yeah,
didn't.
same here.
But I, yeah, do get like people who are hardcore sports fans,
Right,
and do wait like 4 years to watch a World Cup, and especially for a lot of football fans, and especially for some players like Messi, this was like ride or die. For Cristiano Ronaldo, it was ride or die for them because it being their last World Cup, and like,
sorry about
okay,
that.
that's cool, right?
So, yeah,
uh,
they'll do that. Yeah.
yeah, so in those scenario, I do empathize to some bit. Like, I mean, like, why not empathize, maybe understand why people might want to watch the match.
Mm-hmm.
And also for like sports and players, sportsmen there, I think it's for them, it's okay, it's like being able to represent the nation, and they cannot say no, because if they say no, that they're just not going to get to play, but the game will still go on because FIFA owns everything that's going on, and FIFA is the corrupt institution that allowed Qatar to,
To host
bid and
in the
win,
first place.
to bid, yeah, in the first place, right? So there's only so much that they can do, and maybe their jobs are at stake. But yeah, I don't know. They've not talked to me. They've not told me this. And it's just a assumption that I'm making from their
Right.
side. But yeah, at the same time, I did expect a bit more sensitivity from Nepalese or people, at least. I mean, I know it's not like our fault that people had to die, but at the same time, even if you're watching the match, you can still ensure that people know about the atrocities that was happening in
Right.
the space.
Right.
And like if it's something that you waited for years, you can still enjoy the
Right.
game. But at the same time, also condemn what else was going on. And it was not
Right.
just, football, national teams that um, we like that felt uncomfortable to me, but also the artists that were performing in the opening show or the closing show, and like validating the events. I mean, like for sports, like people who are playing the sports, it's their profession, it's the game, right? And it's like a festival that comes once in 4 years. But for artists, it's just saying no to a huge amount of cash money, right?
Right.
Or like, so even in that case, I just felt like if it was highlighted a bit more, it would have been nice. But then
Mm-hmm.
in some ways I knew that people wouldn't care so much because it was about like lives of South Asians and not like from some Caucasian or like white people who have lost their lives, so like
Right.
there's this bias that exists in the media as well. So yeah, there was something I was quite expecting to.
Yeah, and you mentioned that it has been covered by international media, but I went out for a lunch with my coworkers and they were discussing like football. I think the it was already over and they were talking about, oh, who won, what happened, and I brought this up and they were shocked. None of them knew about this. So like a common football watcher doesn't know about this. That really tells you how dismissible this topic is. Okay, like there, oh, people died, but it doesn't have to be the center of attention, like let's focus on the game. Um, and as you said, okay, like you're celebrate, like it comes every 4 years or whatever, but I know it might sound extreme, but like lives over sports, maybe, lives over sports, maybe, okay,
Yeah.
it comes every 4 years, but if you know that people have died, then let's just take a stand, Sunny. And especially, okay, other countries, the whatever, but like so many Nepalese lives were lost, So what about taking a stand for that? Early, like, I think Yeti Airlines, the crash point,
Yeah.
they were like, let's boycott Yeti Airlines, let's boycott like certain airlines and blah blah blah. And they sentiment, they attitude if we had towards this issue, it's like, okay, so many of our brothers, or like I think it was mostly men, okay, so many of our countries men went abroad and they were like cheated in a way, right? If you look at the laws and regulations they had to abide by, they were
mm,
cheated. They were treated like like objects. Like I wouldn't say animals. They were treated like objects, and like the least we could do is at least like show some respect, you know.
yeah,
And while you're in your couch, paying like 500 rupees and enjoying the game every day, discussing goals and this and strategies, there is that the bereaved family who is still struggling to make ends meet, right? And
yeah,
um, it's just really sad. It's extremely sad, and I don't know. Like as a human, it felt very very wrong. Um, and I know it sounds very extreme, but I think we all should have not watched, and at least that would send a message that what happened. And it's I know again as you said it's my हाम्रो fault छैन हैन, like but हाम्रो fault त केहीमा नि हुँदैन नि. There's like so many issues happening, and there's no fault like um in all the bad things that are happening around us. That doesn't mean we don't take a stand, you know.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just yeah, those weeks when people were posting up about World Cup and all, it was very hard for me and Sunny. You just forgot about those families, and it's yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's not just about the World Cup actually, because I mean, like, World Cup was a major catalyst to why a lot of people died. But then people dying in the Middle East for Nepali people was something that was true before Qatar won the bid, and it is still true after like the World Cup is done. Qatar is still like Doha is still a booming city right now, and it still needs to like develop infrastructurally, and it still needs people coming from poor countries like Nepal, Bangladesh, India, and it's not just Qatar; it's a lot of countries in Middle
Middle
East and
East.
other booming countries. Yeah, because they don't have enough human resource to do all those work, and they do need people from this country or like countries like Nepal. And then it's not going to stop from our side because there's no solution to like why would government actively resist people going abroad and working as migrant laborers while the major like income the country generates is
Remittance.
from remittance,
Yeah.
and so if we think about it, yes, World Cup is one aspect because it's this global phenomena that happens like every 4 years and everyone's celebrating it, and that's why it's easier to direct people's attention to it. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, it costs like 25,000, 250,000, 25,000. I think it's 25,000
Yeah.
migrant laborers to die.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, when we think about it, the maybe the numbers will be less because the work might not need to be as fast as it needed to be for the World Cup because they essentially they built a city in 2014. So like in about 10 years they built a city, right?
Yeah.
So but then I think, yeah, so this is an issue. So like the World Cup is over and it's just you and me talking about it still now, no?
Mm-hmm.
And but then migrant workers are still leaving the country. Whenever I roam around Kathmandu, I see. So I live quite nearby Qatar Visa Center,
Oh,
and
okay.
so and then like whenever I like walk past that way, I see so many people still like lining up outside the office and still trying to get out of this country. So that also says something because everyone knows it's unsafe there, no?
Mm-hmm.
But then people still actively decide to go there despite knowing that people that they have known have come back in caskets. So it is also a very vulnerable and very confusing state that we're in, and it's a very difficult topic when you start thinking about it, and you don't know what could be a possible solution to it.
Yeah.
Because can you stop people from going there, or can the state provide needed requirement and basic employment and with good pay to make
Mm-hmm.
people stay in the country? And the answer currently is no. So that's, yeah, that's a very sad part.
Yeah. Also, I think it reflects on Qatar also. If they have so much money, if they're bringing the like migrant workers, they can at least have better regulations. I know. I watched the video. You actually shared like Johnny Harris video, and I watched his video, and so basically their passports were seized. I'm pretty sure they weren't sure like their passports would be seized, and like very long working hours, and they were like made to sign these documents which was in Arabic, so they wouldn't be able to read it. They were made to sign that, and there were clauses that said that you cannot work for anybody else, you cannot leave, and all those things. And that's cheating, right? That's like really shady.
yeah,
And I don't know how much of those details they would know before they leave the country. And definitely, I mean, it also tells about like it also speaks of the condition of our country, like how desperate people are to leave, and they're ready to
yeah,
do it, like they're like just ready to go there, whatever come what may, and they're just ready to go and earn money and send money back home. But it's just I don't know. Yeah, as you said, there's no solution, but I think Qatar could do better. And um I think everyone, like the world, should like kind of put that pressure on Qatar to behave well and treat these workers nicely. So like immigrants, the US even immigrants are also, like, but I'm not saying they're all treated
yeah,
like very nicely, but I think slightly there's like regulations, rules, and Sunny, there's a still better. Like I'm an immigrant here in the US, right? I'm like, what if I was treated that way? I mean, it's not possible that I would like people
yeah,
will still be coming in and sustain that lifestyle the way they are treated back in, um, I mean, back in Qatar. And it's very funny Kiki Banam. It's I'm a little ashamed. This topic, I think this video, there was a documentary that was made, I think 2017 or 2016, and like someone I know had posted, and my comment was very toxic and negative. What I said was, they knew that this was gonna happen. It's their fault they went there. Why should we stop watching the football? So that was my mentality back then. And I don't know, like, sounds so dumb and like indifferent was the issue. But now that I've like assessed and analyzed it, it's not a good thing to say, and we should respect. I mean, it doesn't have to be like, as you said, 25,000. Like even like one life, like who like
yeah,
lost is a life lost, right?
yeah,
We need to kind of think of it as these are individuals, like having individual experiences rather than just numbers. And Sunny, oh, your say just like, oh, 50% went down, that doesn't mean it's good. Like it should be zero, like no life should be lost. That for that person they lost their life, for that family they lost a family member, and we often don't think like that. And we just think like numbers. We just think of these
yeah.
as numbers. We just talk about numbers, but we don't think of them as individuals. Um, yeah, that's what I had to say. Do you want to add on on this?
Yeah, just why. Okay. So yeah, I mean, like about the comment thing, I think we all grow in our own time. So
Yeah,
yeah, definitely, yeah, I've made such toxic assertions in my past as
yes,
well. It's just that I don't think I can find it on Facebook, but definitely I can remember times when I have been, quite ignorant about these things. But yeah, talking about this, I mean, like it's essential. It's not just Qatar as well. Like this is something that does happen, and it's been happening since a very long time actually, and not just by Qatar, like from Saudi Arabia or Lebanon or other Gulf countries, and not just Gulf countries actually, like even in some Eastern African countries where a lot of Nepali people tend to go.
right.
So yeah, in those scenarios as well, we need to understand first, like who are the people from Nepal who choose to go in those countries, and for particularly those extreme works, and it's mostly people who have been denied of the privilege of education, or like have been or have had to go through Nepali education system, like in the government schools in the
Mm-hmm.
rural parts of the country, which is quite sad to begin with. So for those people, the opportunities available in Nepal is very sparse. You don't get jobs. Like even if you are educated, and even if you have a degree, and even if you have experience, it's very difficult to get good job with good pay that would sustain you. And like in Nepal right now, in the past 2 3 years, the like not just 2 3 years, like it's quite expensive to live in Nepal. People think that it's not, but then if you compare it to what we get paid and what we have to pay in order to
Yeah,
sustain decent enough lifestyle in Kathmandu, it's quite jarring actually. And so if you think about population that that is marginalized and ostracized, not just by the economy and their financial status and the financial class, if I may, but also because of their identity and where do they belong to. So if you look at that, it's mostly Madhesi men who are subjugated into going and finding these jobs, and
Right.
also mostly Madhesi men or Dalit men who don't get enough support socially in Nepal. So because there's no social support, there's little to less chance, like no chance of them getting good jobs even. And even for the same jobs that they might get in Nepal, they don't get paid. Like
There's a
it's not even
disparity.
close. Yeah, and it's not even close. And the payment that they go abroad for is like 20,000, 30,000, like for the migrant work, max 70 to 80,000 per month, right? And that's a good paying job if they go as a migrant labor. So if you think about it, it's the it's a bare minimum, like it should be a minimum wage that a country not being able to pay to laborers back home, and people seeking the same amount of job, and like with in more like it in much extreme conditions. No one wants to work in Qatar heat, right? It's unbearable heat. people
Right.
people have died because of strokes there, right?
Yeah.
But then people still go because there's no option in here, there's no um, and there's no opportunity, like employment opportunities. People don't pay well, and it's so difficult. And even if we look back on the recent um, the recent thing that took place, like when Premacharya just took his life in front of our
Yeah.
parliamentary
Burned
house.
himself. Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know if you had time to read his like long letter.
No, I
I,
just knew there was a letter, but yeah, you
yeah,
can.
yeah. I mean, like, I'm just halfway through it because I'm just taking my time to not
It's
get
very
bored. And
triggering.
yeah, so but then he is someone who's representative of, like, he's been to like other countries and worked and earned, and if he came back to Nepal to spend all his savings to try to be an entrepreneur. So if you want to do a job, you don't get paid enough. If you want to start your own enterprise, you don't get paid enough. You're like, so in Nepal it's quite difficult for people to keep like stay and work. And people, I do hear some people saying like ignorant claims like, why don't they farm? There's so much of land. I mean, that's not feasible. Like, who's like, there
Yeah.
are actual farmers who've been protesting for years for the sugarcane like debts that big industries are supposed to pay, and they're still not being paid. Like, why would people farm in Nepal when they're not going to be paid at all for all the labors that they put in? So there's like this huge difficulty that exists, and everyone wants to climb that social ladder that we've created, and people want to send their children to good schools. They don't want their children to face the same fate that they faced.
Yeah.
And and for that, the answer in Nepal right now is going to foreign land. And it's not just for migrant laborers, even for students like me. I don't want to do my masters in Nepal anymore. I don't think I want to work in Nepal for some time now for such a less pay for the job that I have to do you know
Right.
so for people who are finding it difficult to make the ends meet, it's even more difficult for them, and even more pressurizing for them, especially. And they take debts from, like, like personal debts with high interest, like personal interests, and it's so high, and they go there and just to pay the interest at sometimes, but they still do go there. So, and to do all that, and to be at the risk of returning in a casket and leaving your children's future in jeopardy and at risk. And I don't think no parent or no person wants to do that, but we as society are pushing certain people belonging to certain groups of community into the fate. And it's not even if there is a Brahmin or Kshetri or potentially an environment. I think it's a very minor number of individuals who go and work in
Mm.
such dire conditions. It's mostly people from Madhesi community or Dalit community, or people who have faced very difficult economic situations, like despite their ethnicity. So yeah, so the margin we are throwing the marginalized into being more vulnerable. So that's a problem actually.
Yeah, I there's just so many things you said. I'm just trying to process it. I think it also highlights one point, the casteism and the casteism is the word I'd say, like how we discriminate
Mm,
against certain castes and ethnicities. Um, and it just doesn't stop to just discriminating them, but it like affects their entire life, the way they live, the way they earn, and the way their families get sustained. And there's one more thing I wanna discuss here. I don't know how relevant it is, but most of these people or men who go abroad, they almost have this pressure of looking after their family, and they're the only breadwinners of the family, which is again like could be a whole different discussion where in Nepal it's
mm,
always the man who is the breadwinner who has to look after four people if it's like a joint family, 17 people maybe, like to that extent also.
yeah,
And another thing that you discussed here, farm gora, like it's in desmai ke gora. I find that again so ignorant. I don't know if you remember there was like this app called Clubhouse where people used to discuss, and then
yeah,
got myself into like this heated argument. There was this guy in Nepal, and he was like, "Afi gora mali ye gora so te gora so blah blah blah." It's easy, right? It might be one in like lakhs, like it's exactly maybe like they will prosper the way they want to. They will do the things that they want to in Nepal. But it's very, very difficult. And so it's really, really difficult. And especially for people who don't have as many resources, the best option would be to seek like education outside, seek a job outside. And personally, like I don't even know what I would be doing if I was back in Nepal. So like I wouldn't be growing this much. Like no offense to
yeah,
anyone, but I mean, as you said, you want to masters abroad, and why should I stop myself from growing and getting more opportunities just because some people have this nationalistic concern like patriotism and say, oh, afne desh pa kara. Like you have to look out for yourself, man. And there's no
mm,
there's no way like you can this sounds very, very like cynical, but there's no way you can change the entire country just by got like Nepal mein बसेर केही गरेर खान्छु भनेर.
yeah,
There's just no way you can do that. And yeah, I just hope people stop doing this because I think I posted something on Facebook or something like that, or there was this thread on. I used to do this, like I used to reply to people's comments. I don't do that anymore. It's not good for my mental health. And this guy was like, he literally like shamed me for like going to US. He was like, "What are you doing? Like I'm at least staying in my country, blah blah blah," and stuffs like that. And I started talking to him about the remittance and how much I'm, like contributing to the economy and like the things that I do. I also mentioned some social work that I do, blah blah blah. And he just deleted his comment. But I don't know like where this anger comes from. Okay, like what, like how is it so like such a proud thing to be like sitting in the country while you're not even when you're adding to these problems. Like a lot of people who are back in Nepal, like they have such misogynistic um just like that guy. Just like that guy who was very misogynistic, who was calling you out for a number of things. But wherever you stay, you just have to be a good human being. I mean, that's all that matters. And I don't think you should shame anyone
yeah.
for being to any like part of the country or part of the world, right?
Yeah, and also I think the reason why people do that so much in Nepal is because they're genuinely unemployed and they really have no other work other
Damn.
than just like pouring out their frustration on social media. At least
Yeah.
that's my theory. Uh, but but yeah, on a more serious note, and it's something that everyone in all parts of the world do. No, like it's like they travel and they find another place to work. It's
Yeah.
not just it's not we belonging to a third world country. It's not just us who are subjugated to having to go abroad to find better opportunities. I mean, like that's one issue, but then people do that all the time. And better opportunities, it's not always like better GDP, like country with better GDP. It might also be some people have come to Nepal to work from a very developed country because
It's
that's
their
a better
choice.
opportunity for them, right?
Their
It's
choice,
more about
basically. Yeah.
choice. So like when it's driven by choice, I think it's all right. But I think in case of migrant workers, I don't think it's driven by choice because they essentially live in a condition of no alternative.
Mm-hmm.
And So like for me, like if I'm a privileged woman from Kathmandu who can speak in English and has a good command in English, have a good education, and I have like quite good experience with work, right? And I'm a very privileged woman in Nepal. And for me to go abroad for masters, although like there are a few things that is derived, like that the state has driven me to take the decision with like lack of good education, good higher education, to be fair,
Yeah.
but then for some people there is no alternative,
They're compelled to
because
leave. Yeah.
exactly no, they don't have education, they don't have proper pay even if they want to work in like physically tasking jobs. They
Mm.
don't have enough pay, they have a lot of mouths to feed because of the patriarchal society that we live in, and there's no option other than leaving because they've seen their friends leave, and even if it means a slight change in their status quo, they'd still take that chance, even if that means that they might die. Because I think a lot of people, the sentiment behind it is, at least my family will be taken care of until the time that I'm there.
Yeah.
Because I think, and so I think that's one idea. And the other problem, or like the other point of view of this, is like you said, how people don't know what's going on. Because again, like they don't have proper education or like experience in the working field, and there are enough people to cheat from Nepal to make sure that people are, I don't necessarily, I normally use the word sold because they're like literally selling them without
Yeah.
telling,
Yeah.
like if you
Yeah.
are not telling them the entire truth, or telling them that their passports are going to be taken, because there has to be some Nepali person to translate all this process to them, right?
Mm.
And then, so they are being sold by Nepali people, by this manpower agencies. I'm not saying that all manpower agencies are villainous, but yeah, there are some who are doing that, who are in this like all shady business. And then like the case of countries like, or employers of countries like Qatar comes in, who are constantly um, torturing the men because they're making them work for hours that is not humanly possible. They
Yeah.
are not being transparent about their death, they're faking their death certificates, they're not returning their passports even if they want to return, they're not paying them on time, they're not like after, there are people like, we normally just talk about people who are dead, but then we don't necessarily talk about people who have been disabled because of the work, so they have to come back to Nepal because they're of no use to countries like host countries. And then now, like instead of them being the breadwinners, they are being dependent on their families who were not able to, you know
Earn.
earn by themselves in the first place. So for disabled communities, like people who have been disabled because of the work there, there's little to no security provided by the government of Nepal. So like if it's okay for us to boost our economy, and like the little economy that, like like the economy that we have, um, our economy then is not supporting people who have contributed to that remittance, who
Right.
have been disabled and who have come back to the country. So there are these issues, and even if you look at this from a gender lens, so I was doing this research, I think 2 years, and I found out that women whose husbands have gone to work as migrant laborers are more vulnerable to being sexually abused by their own family members, emotionally tortured by the family members. So oftentimes marriage is just a need, and it's like in Nepali society, it's just like
Yeah.
something that people have to do because the son will go abroad and there has to be someone to take care of the family, right?
So, so,
So
so
there
wrong.
have been women who have been abused from the family members, like domestic abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and them not having anyone to go and talk to because husbands are abroad working all the time and not having the time to talk to their children that they have to look after all by themselves.
Yeah.
And in a way they are like single parents. I mean, like they don't have the pressure of having to earn, but at the same time, raising children
True.
in a vulnerable stage is quite difficult. And if you look at the children, they are being brought up in an environment where there's like single parent families is always quite difficult, like especially
Mm-hmm.
for children. So that's another problem. And if their father comes back dead, then that's a trauma that these kids have to process. And it's not just those 25,000 lives. If you look at this, it's like much more than that. Like 25,000 is including people who died in Bangladesh and India as well. But I think it's relevant to all families across this subcontinent.
Yeah.
And yeah, so if you think about it, we are just pushing the vulnerable groups of Nepal to being more vulnerable. And are we thinking enough about the ways that we can help these people? And I think we're not. We don't talk
Mm-hmm.
about it. We talked about
Yeah.
it a bit during the World Cup. And then we're like, okay, the next issue, next trend, what do we talk about it? And then we talk about next trend, and it's quite sad if you look at it that way. But yeah, it's quite confusing.
Yeah, I
And
am
I
never
think
watching World Cup like ever after this. I am never. Um, I think you discussed a lot and a lot of social issues. And Sunny, we didn't we talked about people who died in the World Cup and all that, but so many social issues. Okay, Nepal ma, okay, you're like a girl of age, you're ready to get married, and a guy of age, or you have to get married, blah blah blah. And then you don't realize that if the guy was by himself, had taken his right time, maybe he would have been in a situation where he didn't need to earn so much for like a family. And what's the point of marriage if like if like you're gonna get married, like have a kid and then go abroad? What's the point of marriage? And suddenly, like if you're not gonna be together, I don't understand. Like, what's the point? Like, how is that marriage? I mean, no offense, but how is that marriage? Like your
and
husband is away for like 10, 12 years, and you just, and as you said, the woman is brought into the family just to be the maid of the family, to take care of the in-laws, to look after the child, to clean the room. And I mean, that's something that I have also seen in my extended family, but it's bizarre to think that you get married only for your husband to leave and you to take care of
uh,
his parents behind. Like, so wrong on so many levels. And again, if that guy hadn't been in a situation where he had to take care of his wife and his son and daughter, he wouldn't have to go abroad to earn so much. And we really
yeah,
need to like, um, I think, evolve better from this and um, just live as individuals and not depending on one man to run the entire family. I know that
yeah,
that's again, like, it will take probably years, but it's happening, and I hope the pressure on men will like decrease. Like the
yeah,
last podcast was about toxic masculinity. I'm just getting glimpses of that, and this I think kind of falls under that, where the man has so much pressure
yeah,
to our family, and um, that leads them to again go abroad to Gulf countries for that.
yeah. And yeah, and the patterns that we are showing as a society right now, like I
Mm-hmm.
don't think we're showing patterns that prevents people from not staying in Nepal, because even if you look at the recent cases with Kathmandu Metropolitan deciding to not letting street vendors to live their lives, and people who are the most vulnerable and marginalized in the
Yeah,
community. So yeah, so that option is erased now. So what option will they take? They're going to go abroad, no? Because there's no space for them in, I mean, I'm not just talking about Kathmandu, I mean, like, so it's not just the issue of Kathmandu Metropolitan, but what kind of message is that, is it sending, like the reason why
yeah,
people choose to stay in Kathmandu or the vicinity of Kathmandu is because there are better opportunities, period. You can't find opportunities as good as compared to Kathmandu, even in like other cities of Kathmandu, because it's so concentrated here. It's like nauseating at times. And people don't choose to live in Kathmandu. Like if there were better opportunities in other cities, I would happily live in other city. Like people would definitely live in Pokhara and not in Kathmandu if people had like similar facilities and other places. And it's
right.
so polluted. But people are still living here and still choosing to open this small shop in the polluted footpaths of Kathmandu.
Right.
And and then we are chasing them away and supporting the actions to chase them away. So where are we chasing them to? Are we Do we want more people to go abroad and um, live their lives in hell?
Yeah.
So like we as a society currently, I don't think we're working to protect the vulnerable, and I think which should be the priority of all governing bodies. But
Mm.
yeah, with newer developments that happens in like Nepali politics or governance or social issues, it's just more jarring and more limiting to the more vulnerable groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
And every time whenever like things like these come up, I try to connect it to people living in the most vulnerable positions. And then it's just, yeah, and I always come back to, so now what for these people? And I always, some way I just bounce back to the idea of, okay, now they might want to,
Leave.
migrate out. Yeah. And it's so difficult to think that, because we know what happens, and we know that potential of it. You have an potential to die in any job, but it's about the probability of it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And the probability is so high out there, and like I could not last for a second in the conditions that men of our country currently work at.
yeah. And
And
there's still many, I guess, still like
yeah,
struggling. We're talking
yeah,
about people who died and who were disabled, but still people were
yeah,
living like in horrible situations.
yeah,
The video that you shared, oh my God, there was the guy shared that if you, whenever it would be the end of the day and he would like or like like take his boots off, it would be like water coming down. That's
yeah,
his sweat. It's not even water, like I was like, oh my God, like it's and no wonder they die of like stroke. I mean, in that extreme heat, like human bodies are not supposed to be exposed to those temperature for such a long time. You would die. I mean, and in that
yeah,
documentary also the families also mentioned that how healthy they were when they left, so they didn't have any underlying problems. So definitely,
yeah,
and again, that comes into like the forged like death certificates of like trying to prove that it was like something like that did
yeah,
happen.
heart attack or like
Yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I don't know. It's just uh I don't know, it's just really sad. It's really, really sad.
Yeah, I know. It's just, I think whenever I discuss this topic with anyone, I'm
Hmm.
just left with this very, like I said when I was beginning, it's a very helpless topic to be talking about, because you literally feel very helpless and you don't know how to help mostly.
Hmm.
Um,
The
and
sorry to cut you. The families, is the government providing them with anything like any compensation? Nothing, right?
I don't think, as far as I know, I don't think
Okay.
so.
Okay.
So
Oh, this is wow.
yeah.
I think we should
So
do something, shouldn't we? Like the
I
people who,
mean, like, yeah, but then, so like in these issues, we oftentimes we do want to help them, but how do we help them? Is it financial, and how sustainable is that going to be? Are we going to ask for donations from developed countries then? But whose responsibility is it's the state responsibility. So I think the primary responsibility should fall um, to the state, and I think efforts towards making sure like we advocate for the state to listen to people who have been affected by these issues. So yeah, that's one thing. And also, you know the agencies of Nepali government who have the authority to talk about these issues, they don't. I mean, like Ministry of Foreign Affairs or other diplomats who could raise these issues when whenever there are caskets returning, or whenever there are people who might be want. Okay, my dog started barking. Okay, who might who
okay.
might want. So whenever there are issues when people might want to register the cases, or file some complaints, are we listening? Is the state listening to it? Or do they even have the mechanisms, or like empowerment provided to them to do that? or like are we listening to them, or like simple things as such. So there, these things are lacking because I think it was, I think it was 3 or 4 months ago. There was one Nepali man um, who was sentenced to death, and then I think the our Ministry of Foreign Affairs did. I think they did write a letter or something, but then that didn't get acknowledged, and then the person still was sentenced to death. So it's not just in workplaces, like how Nepali people are treated. Like if it was a American man, who was
Yeah,
sentenced to death by, I think it was Saudi Arabia. I'm not sure about the country. So, but then yeah, someone was sentenced to death. So like if it was someone from the United States or other like predominantly white countries, um, the issue would have been different. So we
right.
clearly know there's a bias out there. um and it's really jarring. Like if we even if we go back, it's not a recent issue. I remember, I don't know if you remember, when we were very young, I think we were in grade 2 or 3, there was this video that was circulating about like Nepali men being beheaded in Iraq, if you
Yeah,
remember or
because
not.
they wore American flag or something like that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because they were working in American embassy or something. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
like some American institution.
Yeah.
And I think they were, so I think in that, even in those cases, even when Nepali people have been associated with um, powerful countries like USA, who would have made it a big issue if those were people from their own country, eh, like there was nothing.
They
And there
didn't care.
has
Yeah.
been nothing. And the agencies in Nepal, they don't talk about it. Our ministers, they don't talk about it. Our diplomats, they don't talk about it. We all know about it. We all have, like, I have my extended families, like members who might not have had to work in such dire conditions, but they are still like, they're still migrant workers, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And there are so many people I know, like even in my family, and people choose to do that, and the effect that it has on families, like their families, is quite sad, mentally, emotionally. So yeah, but then we as a country and as the state and like governments that we have seen changing so much in Nepal, yeah, we've all failed with the vulnerable groups of our country, and especially people who have died or are disabled, or have been victims of, um, I don't know, victims of circumstance of being a
Yeah.
Nepali person.
Victim of
Um,
circumstance, victim of coincidence and fate that they were born in a certain kind of ethnicity and like,
yeah,
oh my God, I just this just is the way you're born, the family that you're born, like decides your entire life and entire life cycle. It's just,
yeah,
and you just have to, and you would have to really, really, there's maybe a few that come up and maybe live a better lifestyle. Otherwise, it's just so many prejudices along the way. Yeah.
yeah,
Yep. That is all that I want. This was a very, very heavy topic, and I really wanted to do this. And we're gonna get a lot of hate for this, so be ready. Because I know there's like these little like sport fanatics who are gonna be like, oh, it's World Cup, blah, blah, blah. But I really do not care. I do not put sports above human life. And I think that's how it should be. And I stand my ground. And do you wanna add anything else to this conversation or any ending notes?
yeah. I think the ending note is, for me, like from my perspective, I know like it's a person's choice whether or not they want to watch a sport or do whatever in their lives. But then, like, I think there needs to be this conscience. Like, they need to do it with conscience. Like, even if they choose to watch a certain sport, I think that should also come with the guilt that they're doing it, or
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so understanding that. And few of my friends, because they have been so invested in like football for a very long time, they did have the guilt and they did want to help and they were finding out ways to help actively. But yeah, still watching the sport and being super guilty about it. So I think it's letting your conscience
Yeah.
know that things that are going on is wrong. But yeah, also like I'm not trying to prescribe the way that prescribe a way of living to people, but at least being mindful about these things, because this is an issue that was there since 2015, in case
Mm-hmm.
of World Cup, but an issue that was there from a very long time.
Right.
If my father himself had made different choices in life, I might have been a person whose father had been a migrant worker. So so this is a very real phenomenon for all the Nepali people. So I think it's very important for all of us to educate ourselves in these matters, and also
Mm-hmm.
actively think about how we as a country and society can make sure that people don't have to end in such a gruesome fate. And I
Yeah.
think it's a collective effort that we have to think about and, perhaps make. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's the note.
I love that. Just to summarize, just have some empathy and
Yeah.
you have that empathy, then putting yourself in another person's shoes and um just understanding the what the victim might have been going through or what the victim's family is going through. What if you're the next person or what if you go through something like that and Sunny? Um
Yeah.
yeah, just be a little empathetic and try and um understand the issues instead of being like, oh, like it's not me, I don't care, and something like that attitude. We need to get rid of that attitude. Anyway, yeah, thank you for doing this. I hope you all will enjoy this when I like publish this one on YouTube, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you. Bye. Thank you, Nishma.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for having me. Bye bye.